So Stuart Brown, you'll see, you can pick out a bit of the accent in terms of where he's from. Our speakers are coming to you today from Canada, from the US, from Germany, and from some country in the Commonwealth that Canadians are also very familiar with. Stuart Brown has held leadership roles in the SAP ecosystem for over 18 years, spanning consultancy, delivery management, practice development, sales, marketing, and analyst relations. It's interesting. I met Michael Dome probably 2010. And in a way, I probably just learned that after Michael's passing, that in essence, I think one of the big reasons why I like Stuart so much is him and Michael are very much alike in so many different ways, and sort of their views and their really approach to the business value from technology is which I greatly admire about Stuart. So there's one interesting thing. I'm not going to go through all his career bullets, but there's one interesting piece that he chooses to put on his bio. I'm not sure why, is that he restored a 1973 VW camper. Stuart, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. I presume you can hear me okay?
Yes.
So yeah, my name's Stuart Brown. I'm the Managing Director of Resulting IT. We're based in the north of England, in the UK, just near Manchester. I'm going to do a very, very quick intro first, just to talk about Resulting for 30 seconds. We're a business side SAP consultancy. We're not a systems integrator. We don't do big implementations. We tend to work customer side, helping people like you to either get more out of their systems integrator or get more out of SAP and help people really become self-sufficient. Paul alluded to Derek Pryor before. I've known Derek for probably 15 years. Derek's our non-exec director since he retired from Gartner. And we do quite a lot of research. So if you go to our website, you'll find a few research reports we've done over the years. We do one every 9 months or so, focusing on topics like how to be successful with SAP, what to think about before you move to S/4HANA, what to think about in terms of SAP skills and how you staff and resource your center of excellence. Nick and I are going to talk to you today in 2 separate sessions. Nick and I have known each other for around 22 years, I think. We worked together at PwC in the late 90s. Between us, well, together actually, we've got 20 years experience building and running and optimizing centers of excellence. And over the years, we've developed a fairly unique approach to helping SAP customers to build an SAP S4 roadmap and business case, and some tools to support that. So I'm going to go straight in, and I'm going to start a little bit random. And I now know Paul mentioned my VW camper van. I'm going to talk to you about my recent vacation for a few minutes first, just as something random to talk about. I live in the north of the UK, and a couple of weeks back during lockdown, I decided to take my VW RV up to the north of Scotland. We went all the way up the west coast and to the very tip of Scotland, or close to the tip of Scotland. Me, my partner, my annoying dog. We went past Loch Ness. We didn't see the monster this time around. And then we drove our way back down through some beautiful countryside, beautiful beaches. As you can see from the photographs, we pretty much wore the dog out. And I was away for, I think, 6 days, and it felt like 3 weeks. There was a little bit of time distortion. And it was all great until I turned off the freeway on the way back home, and I was around 2 miles from my house. And this is the Google Streets view of what I saw. This is my drive home from the motorway. And you can see a little white speck in the distance. And as that speck gets a little bit closer, there's a sign by the side of the road. And usually this sign makes me smile, but on this occasion it filled me with dread, because I knew after a week of holiday, I was going to come crashing down back to earth with 20 emails from Paul Kachina around today's session. Because near my house is something called the Cheshire Dogs Home Centre of Excellence. And it really always makes me smile, because we help clients with their centres of excellence. And these guys are essentially a dog pound or a dog rehoming centre, and they think they have a centre of excellence. And it makes me think, well, what is a centre of excellence? If these guys think it's about rehoming dogs, and we think it's about SAP, who's right and who's wrong? So I got home later that evening and poured a glass of wine, and I was scrolling through Facebook, and randomly I was targeted with a sponsored ad on Facebook. And it was a sponsored ad for Centre of Excellence. Now, I don't know whether Facebook is listening to me and heard me talk about it or what, but it intrigued me slightly because these guys also think they have a center of excellence. And I started to click through what they do. And they provide training courses, quite random training courses actually, around things like foraging or Norse mythology. And I scrolled hoping I'd get some inspiration for today's conversation. Didn't really find anything until eventually I stumbled upon something that I thought would be relevant, which was German for beginners. Because 2 days before I'd received an email in German from SAP relating to my SID, which I needed to decipher. I carried on scrolling, looking for inspiration. Oracle Cards Diploma course was quite interesting. I thought maybe that could be useful. Maybe Oracle are using psychics to help with their product roadmap. But I scrolled on and on looking for inspiration and didn't really find anything that looked like it would be useful. Especially crystal healing for animals, the secret life of trees. And then I landed back on dogs again. And having spent a week in an RV with a dog and driven past the Cheshire Dogs Home Centre of Excellence, at that point I decided to give up. I thought it'd be quite fun to take 3 of those courses and talk to you in the opening part of today's session about 3 things from those courses. So from archaeology, I'm going to ask, what's under the patio? Interior design, I'm going to ask, who are the inhabitants? And from gardening and landscape design, I'm going to ask what you should grow in your garden. Because I think these are fairly critical questions to ask when you're building a CoE. So with the random stuff out of the way, let's talk a little bit about the subject we're here to discuss today. These things are worries and concerns that we often hear from SAP customers. So which hyperscaler should I go with? Should I be looking at HEC? They also ask us what color their migration to S4 should be, green, brown, or blue. And these kind of questions are technical questions around infrastructure and operating systems and databases and monitoring and platforms. We also get asked questions around cloud and how do I manage an on-premise SAP solution alongside cloud-based SAP solutions? How do I evolve my CoE to do that? And then there are other subjects in the verges as well on the outside, managing environments, managing build and release management. Which tools should I use for production copies? Should I use containerization for my infrastructure and virtualization? Should I use Solution Manager or some other third-party tool? And how about Git? And how about DevOps? And how will I be more agile? And the first thing I'm going to talk to you about today is the things that your CoE really should be doing. So you'll notice some of the things in the verges now. So your functional support, every CoE needs a good functional support team. I'm sure you've all got that. You need to focus on security and user provisioning and making sure your GRC is managed properly. You need to focus on development and configuration. But from the first one of those courses today, what's under the patio, I want to make a point here, which is you have a patio in your SAP organization. And some of the things we're going to talk about in your CoE are very much beneath the patio. I'm going to use a couple of swear words here. So if you had Salesforce, you don't know which infrastructure Salesforce runs on, or which database or operating system. You probably don't have basis consultants for a Salesforce solution, or a Marketo solution, or a HubSpot solution. All the native cloud solutions, we don't worry about this stuff. We just expect it to happen. And if we wind back to 20 years ago, those sessions that Paul and Michael and Derek were running about centers of excellence, some of these subjects were really, really important. But now, with modern technology, they're becoming less important. And they're definitely not important to these people. So your customers don't care what's under your patio, nor do your shareholders. Your competitors don't care what's under the patio. And your marketplace and your position in the marketplace doesn't care what's under the patio. The things on the outside are of interest. They do impact the customers and do impact your marketplace. But there are other things that connect your technology with your customers and shareholders and marketplace. Now, the second question I've got for you here goes back to the interior design course I referenced at the start. Who are the inhabitants of this big blue house? If you've got kids my kids' age, and you mention a big blue house, they'd usually say it's a bear, the bear in the big blue house. Whenever I ask customers who the inhabitants are of this house, I get the same answer. They're users, but they're not users, not by any stretch of the imagination. The inhabitants of this house are business people, and they run your business processes to satisfy your customers and shareholders so you can compete in your marketplace. And it's interesting, Paul's point from Michael Doan's book, the SAP Green Book, to fascinate and really focus on business processes. If you've ever read anything on cognitive bias, you may have come across the term priming. And priming is when a word is mentioned that means that everything you think about after that, you can't let that drop. You can't think it in a different way. It changes the way you think. Politicians use priming and marketers use priming to get us thinking in certain ways. If you think of the inhabitants of this house as users, you'll treat them like users. If you think of them as business people who run business processes, you'll think of them in a different way. And sure, there's some basic plumbing and utility services you need to connect your technology up to that house, like a service desk or testing. Even those things use terms like users. They prime on users as well. Users log tickets. Users do UAT. They don't do business testing, they do user acceptance testing. It's the wrong way to think about the people that run your SAP system or use your SAP system. And within that house, business people have to also provision capabilities that are fundamental to your excellence and play a role in your center of excellence. So these things aren't business processes. These things are things you need to do because you're trying to run and optimize business processes. So having business process owners, making sure you focus on training and communications to drive adoption, making sure you can support those business processes. If a business person doesn't know how to do something, rather than log a ticket, they just need to speak to somebody who knows the right business process or the best way to run that business process. The business needs to make sure you've got data that's accurate and precise and consistent and governed. And also you need to make sure that you're constantly improving and driving new requirements that satisfy your customers. And all of that needs to support a business strategy. Without a business strategy, everything beneath in the house and beneath the patio is kind of irrelevant. If you're doing a technical upgrade or a patch on an operating system or a database, that's not part of your business strategy. Nowhere in your business strategy does it say that we'll delight customers by having the right patches in our database. Your business strategy drives a number of strategic thrusts that pushes you in a certain direction. And everything in your center of excellence needs to understand that. Because if you don't drive benefits. And if you don't drive benefits, you can't measure benefits. And if you can't measure benefits, then you're probably just burning cash. So the next question I'm going to ask you today, or the last question actually, is what should you grow in the garden of this house? And the answer is a tree. And the reason you should grow a tree is because you need to provide your business with nourishment, with fruits, things that they can use to drive your strategy and drive your customer success. Too many centers of excellence and too many people that I speak to are focused on the roots and not on the fruits. They focus on the things that matter internally and matter technically, but don't matter to the shareholders and customers and your ability to be competitive in your market. The last thing I'm going to put on this diagram is a garden shed. Because you need to make sure you've got all the right tools and skills and to be able to manage this whole thing. And there's a really interesting metaphor here, which is maintenance, which is what you think of when you think of tools and gardening and watering cans. Maintenance is not the same as tending to your home. If you focus on a CoE that's just maintenance focused, you basically fix things up and make sure they're okay. But that's not the same as being an interior designer and focusing on building the best home, a home you want to live in, and a home that's beautiful and fit for the inhabitants. So before I hand on to Thomas in a few moments, I'm going to finish by just re-answering these three questions. What's under the patio is all the stuff that doesn't matter to your customers and shareholders, to your ability to compete in your marketplace. It's the roots. And I'd urge you, with a modern centre of excellence in your thinking in the next 5 to 10 years, to focus less on roots and more on more important things. Your inhabitants aren't users. The people that you speak to, the people that you serve daily, the people that you do things for are not users. They're business people who are focused on running business processes. And you should be focused on business processes as well. And those business processes satisfy customers and shareholders and make you compete in your marketplace. And finally, the thing that you grow in the garden should be wholesome, nourishing, fresh, tasty, vitamin-rich things that matter to your customers, shareholders, and help you compete in your marketplace. And you're going to hear these words quite a lot later on today from Nick and I around customers and being competitive in your marketplace. Because ultimately, given the backdrop and the context of where most businesses are today, it's a tough marketplace, and people have to be competitive and have to be focused on optimizing their business processes. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Paul, who I think will hand on to Thomas to talk a little bit about why SAP support is a really important part of that.
Actually, Stuart, just before we do that, I just have a couple of questions for you.
Yeah, sure.
And by the way, great presentation and great analogy is sort of that we'll have to spend some time later unpacking it further. And I'm sure you'll talk a little more about that later in today. So, I mean, you talked about stopping referring to as, quote, users, right? That reminds me of another, famous Michael Donism, which was there's only one industry besides IT that calls its customers users.
Yeah, drug dealers.
So I definitely love your framing, and not sure if you'll touch on this later on, but you talked about our focus on things that are under the patio, right?
Yeah.
And what are your viewpoints of, in essence, I'll term it like bridging the gap. So there's a point in time where we'll have to change our focus from that as we move to cloud, do different things. Any thoughts or comments about that migration or how we get away from that, or what are your thoughts?
I think we'll touch on it in the second half of the session today.
Okay.
And I'm obviously not saying it's not important. I'm saying to try and shift focus away from the commodity things and focus things onto the things that make a difference to your business. Of course, you need to make sure you patch your databases. Of course, you need to be secure. But I want to make sure that the successful CoEs going forward shift their focus slightly to be more aligned with business processes and business strategy and less about the things under the patio. Now, when you move to cloud, in a way, because of the way that cloud services are provisioned, you don't have to worry about some of those details. You don't have to worry about monitoring. You don't have to worry about how many basis consultants you need. A useful mindset is, even if you are on premise, is to treat those things as a commodity and just make sure you set your CoE up so those things are just managed and just work, whether that's through tooling or automation or outsourcing. So adopt a cloud mindset even for on-prem is my kind of way of thinking of that.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Stuart. And we'll see you in a few minutes again.